This video is a warning for you. Watch it carefully and it could prevent you from being treated like a dissident in a totalitarian country. A remarkable claim, you might think. But listen.
If you say or write the wrong thing in North Korea, those in charge will destroy you. The same thing happens in many workplaces in Britain.
So what would you need to speak about or write about to produce such a fate? Here's the scandal that places a stain over our entire country. All you would need to speak about or write about would be abuse or fraud or unnecessary deaths. Let me put that another way because it's so extraordinary. People in authority have regularly tried to destroy the lives of whistleblowers who speak up about abuse or fraud or death.
Stalin is often quoted as saying that one death is a tragedy, millions are a statistic. The same principle applies to victimized whistleblowers. There have been so many, we've become desensitized. We don't know exactly how many, but the numbers of gagging orders signed in the last few years gives us a clue. 4,562 local authority staff, 697 NHS staff, and 363 police officers.
In this video, I'm going to give you some examples of some brave people who've spoken up about abuse or fraud or unnecessary death. I'll use these examples to illustrate the clear pattern of what happens to whistleblowers in 21st century Britain, because it's almost as if there's a book out there entitled How to Deal with a Whistleblower. The pattern is very similar to what happens to dissidents in totalitarian countries.
First, misinformation is spread to discredit the whistleblower. The nurse Jean Hader, who complained of poor standards of patient care, was accused of smelling of alcohol at work. The cardiologist Kevin Beat, who raised concerns over staff shortages and bullying at a Croydon hospital, and Paul Moore, who raised concerns over risky practices at HBOS, were both accused of mental instability. And Kay Sheldon, a non-executive director of the Care Quality Commission, raised concerns about inspections and was accused of suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. Next, the whistleblower is banished, not to the gulag like the Soviet dissidents, but the principle is the same. Get them out of the way. Extraordinary disciplinary charges have been trumped up against whistleblowers. For example, 4 NHS staff who stood up for patient safety. Arjuna Veerasinghe was sacked for attending job interviews and training at his own expense while off work. Gary Walker was sacked for allegedly swearing at a meeting. Narinder Kapoor was sacked for alleged fraud that was nothing more than manipulating a financial system in his patients' interests. The prize for the quantity of trumped-up charges goes to the cardiologist Raj Mathu, who was the victim of 200 unfounded allegations, including fraud, sexual impropriety, assault and tax evasion.
But the award for creativity in trumping up charges goes to my wife's former bosses. I became interested in whistleblowing when she raised some concerns about safety and about information supplied to a funding body when she worked for a social work agency. Among the charges that they brought against her to try and hound her out of her job was transmitting pornography from the office.
This involved nothing more than forwarding a joke email she received with a heading that would convince the stupid it was pornography and featuring a picture of a Paris hotel and a hairless cat. But this was nothing compared to what happened a year later when the management board of her organisation performed an Olympic-class somersault. This episode illustrates quite neatly the appalling standard of justice when organisations conduct their own investigation of the victimisation of a whistleblower.
They conducted an extensive investigation when my wife complained that her bosses were trying to hound her out of her job. Their report concluded that there was no evidence, despite the mountain of evidence. Your bosses don't even want you to leave, they wrote. It's all a misunderstanding caused by others. And then, within days of writing this, they stood on their heads and said, well, actually, what's going to happen now is we're going to help your bosses hound you out of your job. And they did.
Solzhenitsyn wrote of the notorious Article 58 law used against dissidents in the Soviet Union. There is no step, thought, action, or lack of action under the heavens which could not be punished by the heavy hand of Article 58. We have a similar law in Britain, which was used against my wife and is commonly used against whistleblowers. The some other substantial reason, a breakdown in trust and confidence, part of employment law. There's no step, thought, action, or lack of action under the heavens which cannot be trumped up into a reason to dismiss a whistleblower under this law. The third part of the process of dealing with whistleblowers is that they are gagged so that no one finds out about their concerns or how badly they've been treated.
The last thing any whistleblower would ever want to do is agree to be silenced. Never in a million years, my wife said to me when they tried to get her to sign a gagging order. But as you know, many thousands of whistleblowers have signed gagging orders. Why? What is it they do to whistleblowers to make them do the last thing they would ever want to do?
There's expert help available to psychologically break people and hound them out of their jobs. The expert called in to help get rid of the hospital consultant Eva Michalak was paid over £59,000. Eva Michalak was so traumatised by what happened she couldn't even give evidence at her employment tribunal. The independent HR consultant in my wife's case was also highly paid. Her brief appears to have been clear: break my wife so she resigns and signs a compromise agreement with its crucial gagging clause.
So how do they do this? First, there is isolation. Whistleblowers are commonly excluded from the workplace for month after month after month, and in some cases for years. And they are denied all contact, even phone calls, to their friends and supporters at work. And these friends and supporters are slowly worked on to turn them against the whistleblower. Then there are the threats against the whistleblower, the constant nagging pressure to sign, the increasing financial problems. Many whistleblowers have lost their homes and also their pension funds. In the case of my wife, and I think these tactics are typical, there were lies, deception, manipulation, hopes raised and dashed again and again for month after month after month.
Many whistleblowers speak of being pushed to the edge of suicide. For example, Dorinda Kapoor and the social work manager Martin Morton, who exposed the overcharging of vulnerable clients in the Wirral. Almost without exception, whistleblowers in Britain say they wished they'd remained silent because they were treated so appallingly after raising their concerns.
Now we come to the obvious question: why does this happen? The answer, I think, is simple: to cover up mistakes and wrongdoing, and to preserve the reputations of those at fault.
The discredit, banish, silence process appears to be standard practice to protect the reputations and careers of guilty people. It's a process that preserves inefficiency, corruption, and a lack of care.
There will come a day. It might not come for decades, but there will come a day when our descendants are as appalled by this injustice as we are appalled by what happens to dissidents in North Korea or Zimbabwe or China. What were we thinking of? People in the future will think. What a barbaric age it was back at the beginning of the 21st century that we could allow this to happen, that we could allow people to be financially ruined, to never work again, to be driven to the point of suicide, simply for trying to do something about unnecessary deaths in care homes or hospitals. What a barbaric age it was in Britain back at the beginning of the 21st century, they will think.
If you want to find out more or about a system that organisations can adopt to address this problem, please take a look at the website.